She pointed at me proudly. The alien queen declared, "This human is my husband." The first human to stand inside the Velathi royal court did not look important. Ethan Hale stood quietly at the edge of the vast chamber, hands folded behind his back, trying not to stare. The ceiling rose so high it disappeared into shadows. Blue-white light flowed through crystal veins in the walls. Massive alien nobles filled the circular hall, their armored bodies towering over him. Their eyes burned like embers, their voices rumbled like distant thunder. Ethan was small here, fragile, human. He was not a soldier. He carried no weapon. He wore a simple diplomatic uniform with the Earth emblem on his chest. His job was to watch, learn, and report. Humanity was new to the galactic conquered, and many species did not believe humans mattered, the Velathi least of all. The Velathi were warriors. Every movement they made spoke of power. Their culture was built on strength, honor, and ancient laws that had not changed in thousands of years. They ruled several systems through fear and respect. And today, they crowned a new queen, Queen Zyra. She stood at the center of the court on a raised platform of black stone. She was tall even by Velathi standards. Her armor was ceremonial, marked with glowing sigils that told stories of conquest and survival. Her crown hovered above her head, held in place by gravity fields older than most civilizations. Her expression was calm, cold, watching everything. Ethan felt her gaze pass over the crowd. When it reached him, it paused for half a second longer than expected. He swallowed and looked away, reminding himself to breathe. The ceremony began. Ancient words echoed through the chamber as elders recited the laws of rule. Noble houses bowed. Warriors struck their chests in salute. The air was thick with power and tension. That was when the first scream cut through the ritual. It was sharp, sudden, wrong. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound. One of the noble delegates collapsed, dark blood spilling across the stone floor. For a single heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos exploded. Figures leapt from the crowd, blades flashing with energy. They moved fast, aiming straight for the platform. An assassination attempt, in the middle of a coronation. Ethan felt his heart slam against his ribs. Velathi guards rushed forward, then stopped. Ethan didn't understand at first. They stood frozen, weapons half raised. Their hesitation made no sense. Then he remembered the briefing, ancient ritual law. During the moment of coronation, no Velathi warrior could draw blood within the inner circle unless directly ordered by the queen. To do so would violate sacred tradition. The attackers knew this. They cut through the court unopposed, moving closer to Queen Zyra with every second. The elders shouted. Nobles roared in anger. Still, no one crossed the invisible boundary. Ethan's mind raced. He was human. He was not bound by Velathi law. He did not think about bravery or fear. He did not think at all. He moved. Ethan broke from the wall and sprinted forward. Several aliens shouted in surprise. A few laughed, thinking it was a mistake. A small human running toward armed assassins. Ethan ignored them. He grabbed a fallen ceremonial staff from the floor and slid across the smooth stone. One attacker turned too late. Ethan slammed the staff into the alien's knee joint where armor plates overlapped. The joint buckled. The attacker crashed down hard. Ethan didn't stop. He rolled, barely avoiding an energy blade, and kicked a loose crystal shard into another attacker's face. The shard shattered against the visor, blinding them for just long enough. It was messy, clumsy, human, but it worked. Ethan shouted warnings as he moved, drawing attention away from the platform. He overturned a heavy table, sending relics and metal crashing to the floor, creating obstacles. He used the environment, the confusion, the unexpected. One attacker lunged at him. Ethan felt a sharp pain tear across his arm as the blade grazed him. He stumbled but stayed upright. He grabbed the attacker's wrist with both hands and twisted with everything he had. The alien was stronger. But Ethan was stubborn. They fell together. Ethan slammed his elbow down again and again until the weapon clattered away. He rolled free, gasping for breath. By the time Velathi guards finally surged forward under the Queen's direct command, The attack was already broken. Some assassins were down, others were fleeing. Silence returned slowly, broken only by heavy breathing and the hiss of damaged energy weapons. Ethan stood in the middle of the ruined court, blood running down his sleeve, chest heaving. He looked up at the platform. Queen Zyra was staring directly at him, not with anger, with focus. The guards dragged the remaining attackers away. Medics rushed to the injured nobles. Elders whispered among themselves, shaken. Ethan expected someone to shout at him, to arrest him, to demand answers. Instead, the queen stepped forward. The entire court went still. She descended the steps slowly, each movement deliberate. Her presence pressed down on everyone like gravity. When she reached Ethan, she stopped an arm's length away. She looked down at his bleeding arm. Then at his eyes. Ethan straightened despite the pain. He bowed his head slightly, unsure of Velathi customs but hoping respect was universal. "I apologize for the disruption," he said simply. His voice echoed too loudly in the quiet hall. "I acted to protect the coronation." She reached out and touched the blood on his sleeve with one clawed finger. She examined it, then looked back at him. "You are human," she said. "Yes, your majesty." "This human," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly to every corner of the chamber, acted without command, without strength equal to ours, without fear. Because someone needed to act. "In accordance with Velathi tradition," she continued, "I claim him." And somewhere deep within the ancient court, something old and unbreakable had just changed. The silence after the queen's declaration did not last long. It shattered. Voices rose from every corner of the Velathi court. Nobles shouted in outrage. Elders struck their staffs against the stone floor in protest. Warriors growled, their claws scraping armor. The words impossible and illegal echoed again and again. Ethan stood frozen where he was, blood still drying on his sleeve. His mind struggled to catch up with what had just happened. He did not understand Velathi law in detail, but he understood tone. This was not a small thing. This was not a polite gesture. This was dangerous. Queen Zyra turned slightly toward him. "Do not speak," she said quietly, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Not yet. You cannot make such a declaration without trial." He acted while you hid behind law. Their movements were firm but not rough. One gestured for him to follow. Ethan glanced once at the queen. She met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. "Trust me." He followed. They led him through corridors of dark stone and glowing symbols. The palace felt alive, humming with old power. Ethan's arm throbbed now that the adrenaline had faded, but he ignored it. He was placed in a chamber smaller than the court but still massive by human standards. A low table stood in the center. Energy restraints shimmered faintly in the air, but they were not activated. Several Velathi elders entered, forming a circle around him. The High Elder studied Ethan like a weapon being inspected for flaws. "You are aware," the elder said, "that the Queen's claim implies intent for union." "Intent matters," the High Elder said, "but outcome matters more." That was enough. Later, Ethan was escorted to a guest chamber under guard. Medical drones treated his arm with gentle precision. The cut was shallow, but the pain had been real. As the wound sealed, exhaustion hit him like a wave. He sat on the edge of the resting platform, staring at his hands. How had he ended up here? Back on Earth, he had been an average man, a former logistics officer. No medals, no great strength. He believed in doing the right thing even when it was inconvenient, that was all. A soft chime sounded. The door slid open. Queen Zyra entered alone. Ethan rose quickly, unsure whether to bow or stand still. He settled for standing straight. "You may relax," she said. "No one listens here." "Your Majesty, I think there has been a misunderstanding." Because waiting felt worse. That is why the choice matters. Of how the court had looked at him before, dismissive and mocking. If he failed, it would confirm every belief they had about humans. He opened his eyes. "I will face the challenges," he said quietly. Queen Zyra studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was not gentle, it was proud. The next day the first challenge began. It was not what Ethan expected. There was no arena, no weapons. Instead, he was led into a vast chamber filled with holographic stars. Velathi observers watched from elevated platforms. The challenge was called the Measure of Will. Ethan was placed at the center, a device attached to his back, feeding signals directly into his nervous system. The elders explained it without emotion. The device would simulate fear, pain, and loss. Not physically real, but neurologically convincing. Many Velathi warriors had broken under it. The test was simple: remain standing. The signal activated. Ethan gasped as the world collapsed around him. He saw Earth burning, cities falling, human voices screaming. He felt the weight of failure crushing his chest. He felt alone, small, useless. His knees buckled. He almost fell. Then he remembered the court, the hesitation. The moment when doing nothing had been worse than dying. He forced himself upright. The visions grew worse. His body shook. Sweat poured down his face. The elders watched, surprised. Velathi endured pain by overpowering it. Ethan endured by accepting it. He whispered names, faces, small human things. He did not fight the fear. He carried it. Minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, the signal cut off. Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping, shaking, but conscious. A stunned silence filled the chamber. The High Elder slowly inclined his head. "The human endures," he said. Word spread quickly through the palace. The second challenge came sooner than expected. This one was public. Ethan was brought before a council of Velathi citizens, not nobles, workers, soldiers, families. He was ordered to judge a dispute between two clans locked in generations of rivalry. Velathi judgment usually ended in violence. Ethan listened. He asked questions. He refused to choose a side. Instead, he proposed shared responsibility, resource division, and mutual protection. The crowd murmured in confusion. Some laughed, but others listened. The clans argued, then argued less. By the end, no blood was spilled. The queen watched from above, eyes thoughtful. The elders were unsettled. By the time the third challenge was announced, tension filled the palace like a storm. The final challenge would begin at dawn, and failure, the elders declared, would mean death. Ethan lay awake that night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. For the first time since arriving among the stars, he was afraid. Not of dying, but of letting humanity down. Dawn over the Velathi capital was slow and heavy. Dark clouds drifted between towering spires of black stone. The city below awakened with deep horn calls and low vibrations that traveled through the ground. Ethan stood on a wide platform overlooking the inner districts, his hands clenched at his sides. Today was the final challenge. No one explained it to him fully, only that no Velathi consort had ever passed it without being born Velathi. That alone was enough to tighten his chest. Queen Zyra stood beside him, silent. She wore lighter armor today, practical and unadorned. Her gaze rested on the city, but her attention was on him. "You may still withdraw," she said quietly, "even now." The High Elder's voice carried through the air. "The final trial begins." The city was gone. In its place stood an enclosed sector of the capital, sealed off by towering walls of energy. Buildings were damaged, smoke drifted through the air, emergency lights flickered, a simulated disaster zone. The High Elder's voice echoed again, calm and merciless. "This is the trial of continuance," he announced. "You will remain here for one cycle. No weapons, no authority, no command. If you survive, you pass." They looked around in panic, roaring in distress as the simulated environment fed fear into their instincts. Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't about him surviving, it was about them. Almost immediately, a tremor shook the ground. A building collapsed nearby, sending debris crashing into the street. Civilians scattered, some charging blindly, others freezing in terror. Velathi instincts pushed them toward dominance or paralysis. There was no leader, no clear path. Ethan shouted, his human voice thin but sharp. "Everyone stop, stay together." He grabbed a fallen support beam and used it to brace a damaged wall that threatened to collapse further. He waved frantically at nearby civilians. "Help me, he yelled. "This will fall." The ground shook again, lights flickered, sirens wailed, the simulated disaster escalated. Ethan moved constantly. He organized small groups not by rank but by ability. Stronger Velathi lifted debris. Smaller ones guided younglings. Injured were placed in sheltered areas. He didn't command, he asked. He listened. When a Velathi warrior growled that humans were not meant to lead, Ethan met his eyes and said, "Then don't follow me. But if you stay alone, you will die." Flames erupted from ruptured conduits blocking main routes. Velathi panicked, their fear responses pushing them toward reckless charges. Ethan remembered old emergency training from Earth. He tore fabric into strips, soaked them, and showed others how to cover their faces. He directed airflow by opening and sealing paths. It was not perfect, but it worked. Above it all, unseen by Ethan, the elders watched. They were unsettled. "This is inefficient," one elder muttered. And yet, another replied, "They live." The simulation shifted from disaster to invasion. Velathi sensors screamed as an enemy fleet appeared in the artificial sky. Ground units deployed, mechanical constructs designed to overwhelm. The civilians roared in terror. Velathi warriors charged instinctively, eager to fight. Ethan ran in front of them. "Stop!" he shouted. They ignored him. The first wave of constructs opened fire. Several warriors went down, stunned but alive. Ethan felt fear claw at his chest. This was the breaking point. He climbed onto a wrecked vehicle and screamed with everything he had. "This isn't a battle you can win alone," he shouted. "They want you separated." They dragged debris into choke points. Others followed. Soon the streets funneled the constructs into tight formations. Ethan coordinated movement, sending signals by hand and voice. Civilians helped. Warriors protected them. The constructs advanced slower now, not unstoppable. Ethan didn't fight, he directed. He was everywhere and nowhere, moving until his vision blurred. Then the unexpected happened. A real alarm rang out. Different tone, different pitch. The elders stiffened. "This is not part of the simulation," one said sharply. A real external threat had arrived, pirates. They had been watching the trial, waiting for weakness in the Velathi capital's defenses. They struck hard. Real ships tore through outer defenses. Real explosions lit the true sky beyond the simulation dome. Panic rippled through the observers. Queen Zyra's claws tightened. "End the trial," an elder demanded. She shook her head. "Not yet." There was no reset. He made a decision without hesitation. "Everyone listen," he shouted. "This is no longer a trial. This is an evacuation." Ethan transmitted instructions using emergency beacons, rerouting civilians toward deeper shelters that connected to the city's core. Velathi command units outside the trial zone intercepted his signals. They hesitated, then followed. The human had already mapped survival. When the energy walls finally dropped, Velathi forces poured in, reclaiming the sector. They found civilians alive. Organized, protected, they found a human collapsed against a wall, barely conscious, still giving directions with a shaking hand. Queen Zyra reached him first. She knelt without hesitation, lifting his head gently. His eyes fluttered open. "Did we hold?" he whispered. She answered softly for him alone. "You saved them." The elders stood in silence. The trial of continuance was complete, and none of them could deny the truth anymore. The human had not just survived, he had led, and the galaxy had felt it. Ethan woke to quiet, not silence but a soft hum like distant wind moving through metal. His body felt heavy, wrapped in warmth. For a moment he did not know where he was. Then memory returned in pieces. The trial, the civilians, the real attack. The Queen's voice. He opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was smooth and pale, glowing gently. Medical lights shifted as they sensed movement. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain flared across his shoulders and back. "Do not move," a calm voice said. Queen Zyra stood beside the resting platform. She was not wearing armor. Instead, she wore a simple garment of deep blue, marked only by a small symbol at her chest. She looked less like a warrior now and more like a ruler who had been awake far too long. Ethan relaxed back against the platform. I messed up, did I? Your evacuation routes allowed us to respond faster than any prediction. That's good. Recordings of the sealed sector leaked to the Galactic Concord. Other species watched in disbelief as a single human coordinated a response that Velathi doctrine said was impossible. They saw warriors taking direction from a human voice. They saw civilians surviving because someone chose cooperation over dominance. They saw humanity not as conquerors, but as stabilizers. The elders convened a public assembly. Ethan stood beside Queen Zyra in the great court once more, his arm now supported by a light brace. He felt smaller than ever, but something had changed. The court did not look at him with mockery now. They looked with respect. The High Elder stepped forward, his voice carrying across the chamber. By law and tradition, he said, the Queen's claim is validated. The human Ethan Hale has met the requirements of spirit, judgment, and survival. Of humanity watching from afar. Of what it would mean for humans to have a voice here. He looked at Queen Zyra. She did not command him. She waited. I accept, Ethan said. The chamber erupted. This time not in anger, in awe. The ritual that followed was simple by Velathi standards. No blood, no dominance, just shared presence. The Queen placed her crown briefly in Ethan's hands. Not surrendering it, trusting him with it. The message was clear. Power shared was power strengthened. Across the galaxy, the impact was immediate. Human ambassadors were suddenly invited into councils they had never been allowed to attend. Trade routes opened. Defensive alliances were proposed. Humanity was no longer seen as weak. They were seen as adaptable. Velathi society began to change as well. Training doctrines were rewritten. Command structures adjusted. Civilians were given greater voice in emergency planning. The Queen encouraged it openly, citing the human method. Not all approved. Some nobles resisted. Some warriors resented the shift, but none could deny the results. Ethan struggled with his new position. He was not a ruler by nature. He did not crave authority. He spent long hours listening, mediating disputes, asking questions that others dismissed as simple. The Queen valued that most of all. They spoke often in quiet moments away from the court. You challenge my people, she said once. I challenge myself too, he replied. She laughed at that. A rare sound. Months passed. Humanity's reputation grew not because of weapons or fleets, but because of presence. Humans became advisors, coordinators, crisis planners. They were invited not to dominate, but to help systems survive change. The day of the formal union ceremony arrived under a clear sky. It was broadcast across known space. Ethan stood beside Queen Zyra, no longer bandaged, but still human. Still small next to her, still imperfect, but no one laughed. When the Queen once again pointed at him and declared him her husband, it was not shocking. It was celebrated. Later, standing on a balcony overlooking the capital, Ethan watched the city lights flicker like stars brought to the ground. I never meant for any of this, he said quietly. Queen Zyra stood beside him. Neither did I, she replied, yet here we stand.